So welcome to episode 2, part 1 of Boat Talks on Sophia Sojourn. I am your host, Laura Beth, and we are standing on our wonderful venue, my houseboat, Sophia Sojourn. This month, I'm so honored to welcome our guest, Brie LaJoy Wareham. Weirman, we're going to have fun with me trying to learn to say that name. Author of a wonderful story, Louder Than Words, available on Amazon.com. If this is your first time watching Boat Talks, we divide this into 4 segments. The very first segment, we're talking about just Brila's background and her biography in the book. The second, we talk about her objectives for writing a book. The third part, I ask Brila 3 questions that I get to ask each of my guests on Boat Talks. And the fourth part, she gets to turn the tables and ask me anything that she wants. So without further ado, my interview with Brie LaJoy. This was a really wonderful time. Well, welcome back to episode 2, part 1 of Boat Talks on Sophia Sojourn, and I am here with Brie LaJoy Wareham. Wehrman. Okay, your maiden name is Wildhelm. Widhelm. And your married name is Wareham. Wehrman. And since I've known you, I have been combining those 2 names. Yeah. So I know your parents,
yes.
Obviously, so that name is familiar to me. Wehrman.
That's correct.
Yeah, I have 3 more parts to introduce you and to get that right. Brila has recently released the book, Louder Than Words, and which I just got to finish reading very recently. Very excited to talk with you about that. But before we get into the book is loosely based on your life, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I want to know a little bit more about your life, and what inspired you to read the book, and what led to that decision to tell that story, which was you did an amazing job of, by the way. So tell me kind of a little bit about where this comes from.
Well, writing has been my avenue of not keeping everything inside since I was very little. I've been a writer since I was very young, mostly poetry. And this book is actually based on a poem that I wrote in high school, about 16 or 17 years old. And it's right there on the cover there, the story of the cloud that rains tears. Mm-hmm. And if you had asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, when I was young, I wanted to be a writer. It took me a long time to get to this point.
Sure, yeah.
But at some point, I decided I don't need a degree. I don't need permission. I don't need a publisher to write my story. So I got started on it. I probably wrote it in my heart for a long time before I actually put pen to paper. But while it is a fictionalized story, every single element in that book represents something real.
Yeah.
I decided that if I just were to try and explain to you my story as it was, no, you wouldn't understand it. I needed to put tangible, enemies and tangible elements into the story so that people would understand what it was really like.
So you're dealing with some abstract issues in your life growing up, and tell me about that time leading up to where you wrote that poem. It was in high school.
Yes.
Okay. And
I wouldn't say that was not one of the poems that I worked on. It was one that was inspired, and it just came out. Mm-hmm. In a matter of 10 minutes, from start to finish. It was on paper. I didn't need to edit it. It was finished. I wrote it just as it was, and that happens often where I'm inspired and I've got an entire, poem in my head. And I just got to get it on paper, and when that happens, I know it's from God.
Yeah.
And I've honed my writing skills and learned things, and you took some creative writing classes, but none of that was necessary for this kind of writing.
Sure. Yeah, I understand that. So the poem is, it's heavy. I mean, I don't want to go as far as say dark, but
it did come from a very dark experience.
Okay, and
it did. But even in at the time, 17 years old, I knew God, and I had hope, and honestly don't think I would have made it, to 19 if it weren't for my loving family who showed me who He was and allowed me a relationship. And he took care of me. He carried me through until it was time for me to learn the truth and be set free. So yeah, it was a very dark experience, but.
And in our conversations, you've used the word depression. So at what point in this journey through life did you first give yourself, or were given that label? And looking back, how far back did that go?
I was pretty much born that way.
Okay.
For as long as I can remember, I struggled with that. I didn't know what it was, because for me it was who I was. Mm-hmm. And it was about the time I wrote that poem that I realized this isn't, everybody doesn't struggle with this. Everybody doesn't have this issue, and I want what they have. And I didn't know how to get it. I thought I could just decide that I want to be like this person, or I want to be able to share my feelings, or let people in.
Don't be happy.
And just decide that. And, I prayed about it, and I figured, God can just do that. And, I believe sometimes maybe He does, but the process that He took me through to get to that moment was so much more valuable. Mm. And He took care of me through it. But His timing is perfect. And I was 19 when I learned the truth, and instantly was a holy person. Just instantly. I still had a lot of healing to do.
Sure.
But I was able to recognize and realize that's not who I am. Mm-hmm. It's something that happened to me, and I can work through it and become who God intended for me to be, and hopefully help some other people along the way.
Absolutely. You keep mentioning when you learned the truth. There's two types of truth that kind of keep us in bondage. One that we're holding inside of us, and one that's being held from us. I know from reading the book, and I will give a little bit of a spoiler here, that this was a truth that was kept from you. Talk to me a little bit about that, and about that moment when that was given to you.
When I learned what happened that caused my fear and depression, it was a perfect picture of the truth setting me free. A lot of people would think that hiding that from someone, they were really young when that happened, if we just don't tell her, then she'll never be hurt by that. Mm-hmm. But it's not true.
Okay.
It hurt to live in that lie for 19 years. It devoured me. And that's all it took, was learning the truth to be able to deal with it and give it over to God and start the healing process.
Yeah. If it feels like we're dancing around some pieces here, we are, because we don't want to totally spoil the book for you. But I do want to say, just for people that might be triggered by certain things, this was not an issue of sexual abuse. This was not some awful thing that your family did to you or anything. So none of those triggers exist in the book. It's a very powerful and very unique story, but your experience is so, I've heard it so many times, as far as being trapped with those words. One thing you did in developing the characters, you chose to to give them this disease, which I thought was a very powerful illustration. You chose autism. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
I chose autism not because I dealt with it, but because I may as well have.
Okay.
I felt unable to really speak what was inside because I didn't understand it.
Okay.
I couldn't put words to something that I didn't know with my logical, verbal brain. I didn't have words when this happened to me. So it happened to my spirit. It was feelings and emotions. It wasn't words and stories.
Yeah.
And so I was never able to tell people what was going on or what was wrong. I could put it into poetry, but I was too completely fearful to let anyone in or to let them read my poetry, for the most part.
What were you afraid of?
As I was starting to realize that I was different than other people, I didn't want to be different.
Mm.
I wanted what they had. And if I let them in, then they might reject me. They might know that I was different. And honestly, they did. I mean, my mother will tell you that she worried about me every day. She actually did read that poem at the time, and I didn't know it until later, but she was terrified at how depressing it sounded and how, there's a little element at the end of the poem, and in the book, my character finishes the poem, adds a line to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it happened. The day that I discovered the truth and pulled that poem back out, I finished the poem. I added the last line. But without that last line, there's not much hope in the poem.
True.
There, God is there. There's a line that says, with caring words, sees her, the cloud passing by. And that's how I felt.
Yeah.
Like God knew me, and He loved me, but everything He had for me was just out of my reach, and I was just floating in the sky all by myself.
Yeah.
And where are we going with that?
It's okay. No, you were. It's good, and it's just the poem was there,
why
the
I
poem was
chose
there, and why you
autism.
chose autism. Yeah.
Right. So I could speak, but I couldn't really open up.
Yeah, and we talked earlier. It was kind of where autism physically is keeping sometimes keeping people from speaking or speaking clearly. This was an emotional trap or an emotional prison that you felt.
I felt completely misunderstood almost all the time. And when you can't speak, you can't be understood.
Right.
And so like I said, I needed to put something tangible for the reader to understand what that spiritual journey was like, and that's exactly what it was like.
Yeah, there's a depression and that prison. There's a great sense of not knowing. There's a great sense of not being able to put a name to it, or and just speaking from my own experience with depression, you get those moments when you're sad and you don't know why. And I mean, am I hearing you right?
I spent 19 years being sad and not knowing why.
Okay.
And that can really mess a teenager up.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and teenagers are pretty easy to mess up anyway, and you add something like that to it, and it certainly makes. When you heard the truth, and you felt that freedom from it, you were able to quantify it and put a name to it. Did you feel like you weren't as alone as you thought you were?
I did. I immediately, I think understanding what happened made me realize I wasn't rejected.
Okay.
I received what happened as rejection, and not, so that was something that someone did to me. But being able to understand it in words, I was able to work through wasn't rejection. That, was just something that happened, and
Yeah.
it wasn't my fault, and there was nothing I could have done to fix it. So kind of lifted the burden off of me.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And you came a long way from the feeling that burden to being able to tell the story like this. And we're going to talk in our next part about what your vision is and what your desire and hope is now that the story is out there, and what you're going to do. Louder Than Words is available on Amazon.com. You can download it to your device of choice, or order the hard copy for yourself. And I look forward to finishing this conversation and talking more about where you're headed with this, and talking more about your engagement with the church. And thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So thank you for joining us for part 1 of episode 2 of Boat Talks on Sophia Sojourn. Don't forget to look for Brila's book on Amazon.com, or actually anywhere that you buy electronic media. Also, last month I announced that I was hoping my book was going to be out by the end of this month for the first of next. We've run into some setbacks, as is often the case with publishing projects, but in the meantime, you can support not only Boat Talks, but also the book by pre-ordering the book through my GoFundMe page. You can find that link on my blog under the My Book tab. And don't forget to come back next week. Part 2 of my interview with Brila will be posted, and I look forward to seeing you here. Have a great week.